Hey everybody. So I'm sorry I haven't been doing videos. I plan to every day, but there have been so many challenges at getting this book, In Trudeau's Kitchen, into production. Um, just so many unnatural things have happened. I don't mean unnatural in the ethereal realm, so maybe that's part of it too. But there's a battle going on for the heart and soul in relation to this book. Efforts being made on some energetic levels to keep it from getting out into the world, and who knows who'll get paid off to make it not happen. But I am fighting for it tooth and nail. I am calling on my angels. I am calling on my warriors. I'm calling even on Jesus Christ, because I know that there wouldn't be so much trouble around getting this book into the world if this book didn't matter. And because I know that it's even not even about me or Sophie Trudeau or anything. I'm just sort of the one who's carrying the ring or something. But really, I'm not sure there's a book that meets this world as perfectly as this book does. And I'm not saying it because I wrote it. I it was the most difficult thing I've ever experienced. Spent 5 years on the Devil's Playground. It's no pleasure. But I certainly understand the human experience in ways I didn't before. I certainly understand the spiritual bypass, which I've engaged in ways that I haven't before. I understand fantasy, things that you have to think about or imagine in order to get through the day like never before. And my compassion for the human experience has expanded remarkably exponentially as a result of this experience. And but the story is not the Jeff Brown story like soul shaping was, and the first part of Grounded Spirituality was. It really is, I feel like it's the people's book. It's a human story about having to overcome and to be exposed to and now have words for, like techno-terrorism and invisibilities and funneling, and for exactly what's going on with technology, what's manipulating us, who's manipulating us. And you would never imagine, I certainly didn't imagine, maybe you would have, how fragile the political world is, that it has to do this much to one guy's life in order to keep his story from being told. Like, what the fuck are they hiding? I already know parts of what they're hiding, but it's not a strong world. It's not a powerful world. The grassroots world, humanity, and we've forgotten this. We've been unbraved. That's where the power lies. This political world is certainly true in Canada. They're just a bunch of weaklings. I mean, what, you can't bear somebody to tell a story that maybe doesn't make you look good or exposes something that you're trying to hide while you try to tie Canada up in all kinds of communistic knots? Because that's, the next thing that's going to happen is, and mark my words, he's going to declare a national emergency, probably based on political violence, which his administration has encouraged, in order to seize control of the nation. And you may think that's the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard, but so I'm just saying, mark my words. So my story speaks a lot to that. I couldn't understand for the longest time why are they giving me all this trouble, even after my first and second effort to disconnect from Sophie Trudeau. Like, who cares? Just say thank you for your service, adios. But because of the fragility of their minority government, I guess, and because of what the ultimate globalist agenda was for this administration, I see Trudeau really as the door opener and Carney as the closer. I understand why they had to contain me and whoever else, and I'm not the only one, I can say with certainty, that had to be contained. Because, in Canada's not the U.S. In the U.S., all this stuff about prime ministerial marriages and all the stuff they do off to the side is sort of becomes part of the zeitgeist. Canada, for all kinds of different reasons, our pseudo politeness, our monarchistic conditioning, all the rest of it, we don't really, ever talk about these things. The Canadian media told me stuff that you'd be blown away by it. You'd say, why is that not in the newspaper? Because that's what we do here. They could be boiling babies in their kitchen, the prime minister and his wife, whoever it is. and the Canadian media will not report on it, would not report on it. Now it's worse because they're getting money from the administration to stay in business. So it is really quite something. And it helps me to understand more, the bigger picture of what's happening here. Trump in the 51st state and what's happening in Canada and why they're not part of the Five Eyes anymore, and intelligence from Canada is not trusted with their global partners. All of this has been happening and building over the last number of years. And so as a result of it, a citizen like me who's unprotected, easily turned against, they bribe and blackmail and defame and all the rest of that. I have proof of that. Ends up going through the nightmare of all nightmares. But at least there's enough in the story to show the way in which these systems operate and what techno-terrorism looks like and how our consciousness is being remarkably and radically polarized and manipulated. We know that now because we're all turning against each other. There's no center. The center didn't hold. You're either left or you're right, or you're pro this or you're pro that. I mean, whatever it is, it's impossible to have a conversation. We're certain the other is the enemy. I mean, we talk about othering. It's othering it's beyond anything. And this is deliberate. And it's setting the stage. Meta did a lot of this, right, with the algorithms. And it is setting the stage for a third world war that I believe has already begun. So let me take you back to, just for a bit, 2016, 2017, when this verstinkende journey began. I read a little from chapter 2, which is called, ironically and interestingly, Nothing to Hide and Nowhere to Hide It. And it just sort of begins, I'll just begin with the story of the books getting to Sophie Trudeau. Then I'll jump into then connect her first, bringing my voice or bringing my quotes into the world on her page. So my journey with the Trudeaus began in the summer of 2015, months before Justin became Prime Minister. My old friend Robin, it's just a pseudonym, had gone to one of my favorite holistic centers, the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, for a yoga retreat. As it turned out, Sophie had also attended the same workshop. To this point, I knew very little about Sophie and Justin. I was familiar with Justin's father, former Canadian PM Pierre Elliott Trudeau, but not with his son and his son's wife. I seldom read the news, and I found the political world out of touch with the shifts in consciousness that many of us were aspiring to and that were occurring naturally on a grassroots level. Toward the end of the week, Robin called me to ask if it was okay for her to give Sophie some of my books. She had a bunch of my books. She often carried them around and gave them out to people. She had a pile of them in her van, intended for a mutual friend on Long Island. This was not uncharacteristic for her. She was perhaps my biggest writing cheerleader, often passing my book. She sang Sophie's praises. She liked her. They're actually quite alike, so it makes sense to me, and felt certain that Sophie, would resonate with my work. She was right. At first, I resisted. Important, these moments of resistance. Listening to them. After a number of years writing in the self-help field, I had grown to dislike the passing of my books to well-known people. It's not that I was opposed to them resonating with my work. I just didn't like the feeling of chasing them. It activated the part of me that had grown up in an economically peripheral family, always on the outside looking in. It somehow implied that I hadn't arrived yet and needed their help. But that wasn't true. I no longer needed their help. I had things right where I wanted them. As a creative, that's true. But Robin did what cheerleaders do. She pushed me. So in the middle of my busy day, I ignored my intuition and gave in. After all, I had to agree with her. This was a little different. We weren't chasing someone to get their attention. Sophie was right there. She'd met her and liked her, and it felt natural and unforced to give her the books. And she wasn't from the self-help aristocracy that I had pandered to some years before. She was the wife of a Canadian politician. What harm could come from that? Don't answer that. This was the first time that I ignored my intuition in this situation. It wouldn't be the last. Robin gave Sophie a few of my books. Included among them was my first book of quotes, Ascending with Both Feet on the Ground. Thereafter, I didn't give the passing of the books a second thought. I was busy writing and growing in social media, and in Reelman Press, Susan and I were putting out a bunch of books, was demanding much of my attention. On November 4th, 2015, Justin Pierre James Trudeau was sworn in as, what's the matter? You can't have two names that you can fit for. Was sworn in as Prime Minister of Canada. By the following spring, I was feeling a certain degree of alignment with the Trudeaus, at least theoretically, right, in the projected landscape. His declared emphasis on open and transparent government, his self-proclaimed feminism, their public willingness to destigmatize mental health issues, and I dare say the fact that they were both yogis left me feeling like we were on the same page. I had been stretching, or attempting to stretch, on the mat and writing about inclusivity, gender equality, and mental health issues for years, and never imagined that the things I believed in could be deemed significant by influential political leadership. It was truly exciting. Canada had just finished a conservative period with Stephen Harper as PM. Trump was rising in popularity in the US, and here was the aesthetically pleasing, allegedly liberal-minded, I'm adding it, feminist supporting, and seemingly genteel Justin Trudeau. Totally different energies that gave me, at that time, a sense of hope. I'll jump ahead. This was the last I thought of it until February 7th, 2017. On that fateful day, I was told that Sophie Gregoire Trudeau had posted a quote on her Facebook page from one of the books she had been given by Robin. It wasn't just any quote. It was a quote about transparency and truth. Looking back on it now, the irony is not lost on me. Close quote. We have nothing to hide and nowhere to hide it. It just takes so much energy to bury our truths, and what can we reveal that hasn't been others' experience anyway? Our secrets aren't that unique. They are intrinsically human. Let's practice the art of radical transparency and shameless self-admission. Imagine truth circles in every community. I admit, and then we dance. Jeff Brown has said with Wolfie Monroe. So that's the post up on Facebook. The quote was accompanied by a link to a global news piece wherein Sophie discussed her formal struggle with bulimia. When I saw this, so I asked you just if you relate to this sort of this like seeming opportunity, and then something inside of you arises, intuition. We use the word intuition, it's like kind of almost a new age term for some people, but it's a profound thing. It's the knowing of the being that carries forward, I believe, on a soul level, cellular level, and ancestral and generational level forever and ever and ever. It builds awareness. When I saw this, I felt delighted and strangely relieved. It certainly wasn't the first time that my writings had been shared by a well-known figure, but this felt different. This wasn't another author or a pop star. This was the wife of a world leader. And not just any world leader, the PM of the country I had grown up in. Suddenly, that very real part of me that never felt like a true Canadian fell to the wayside, replaced with the very distinct feeling of, I belong. So you see the psychological pull-in, right? Sociological pull-in. I look back now and I find it incredulous that a simple post by a stranger could hold this much significance. And yet it did. Feeling excited, I pressed share. Sophie's post was now on my Facebook fan page. I lay down for a nap, but I was too excited to rest. I jolted out of bed, roused by the idea that I would try to connect with Sophie to see if she needed any help with volunteer writing. Although I was no longer someone who strongly believed in the law of attraction, I couldn't help but recognize that in last year's April Fool's post, I had transmitted the intention to contribute. I couldn't imagine that she had seen that random post, but perhaps the universe had. Even more significantly, I had recently reread a book called Brother of the Third Degree. I had a yogi friend named Sean Korn that sang its praises. Fantastic book. Written in the early 1900s, but so relevant for today. The story revolves around a cadre of wise women and men who have found their way into places of power. While there, they quietly whisper in the ears of power holders, surreptitiously wielding positive change. I can write it, but I can't say it. I was riveted by this book, both because it gave me hope for the kind of world I longed for, and because I found the idea of exerting a positive influence from behind the scenes utterly delightful. I'm not someone who longs for all the credit, but I am someone who wants to actualize his abilities for the higher good. The idea that I could quietly influence what I then perceived to be the Trudeau's benevolent mission felt entirely right. Right? So it's all optics now, right? And projections. I have no idea who these people are. I have no idea. I have no idea if their mission's benevolent. I have no idea if that's just the way they gain fame. I don't know anything. But I know that I'd read this book, so that was part of it. That feeling of like, oh, synchronicity must be. I read this book and it's about this, and now I can whisper into the ears of power. The thing about synchronicity is, most of us have learned we can spot synchronicities, but we don't often know for a long time if they're good or bad synchronicities. So there was that, and then there was like how I grew up, and there was all of these pieces coming together that said, golden opportunity, make the world a better place. Heal your family of origin in a way, and heal yourself too. I wasn't looking for power, but I think I was looking for healing on some level. I contacted my friend Robin to see if she had contact info for Sophie. She didn't, but she did have contact info for Sophie's friend, someone she had also met at the yoga retreat in 2015. She was happy to pass on a note for her to share with Sophie. Writing the note was easy. Sending it was difficult. I remember the moment like it was yesterday. Perhaps we always do when we make the mistake of ignoring our intuition. I was sitting in front of a computer at a FedEx outlet in Toronto. I stared at the email, and my nattering intuition, like a little imp on my shoulder, piped up and said, "Don't do this." Imagine Judd Hirsch on your shoulder. That's how I imagine it. I deleted the email. Then I wrote it again. I pulled my hands back from the keyboard and closed my eyes. I felt confused, oddly at war with myself. I searched for the answer. Step toward or step away. On the one hand, my genuine desire to make the world a better place. The feeling that I had now cracked the significance code and lifted my family along with me. And the feeling that the allegedly good-hearted Trudeaus were our great defense against the racism, sexism, and hatefulness that I thought was taking root in Trump's America. On the other, an all-knowing, intuitive voice inside firmly said, "Don't do this. You spent your life trying to escape the bullshit of the world. You're in a good place now. You're in your writing zone. Don't fuck with it. Stay away from the political world." Clear as a bell. And there was something else. I wasn't quite sure what it was. Something way deep inside and barely discernible was telling me that something here was not what it appeared to be. I was perhaps too blinded by my projections to understand it, but something didn't feel right. Something was askew. I decided not to do it. And then, just as quickly, I reached for the keyboard at that FedEx and pushed send. My intuition had lost the day. Soon thereafter, Robin informed me that her email to Sophie's friend had bounced back. Much to my surprise, I breathed a deep sigh of relief and replied, "No worries. It's a sign. Not the right time. I'll approach after this book is done." I was working on ground spirituality. The next day, she informed me that she had also sent it to Sophie's friend on Facebook Messenger. It had been marked read. The strangest journey of my life had unknowingly begun. End of that chapter. It's interesting. As a Jew, my friend also a Jew, both coming from so much of Jewish history, which has to do with, feeling peripheral and not accepted within the culture at large. I believe to a large extent her excitement about this opportunity without her thinking about it or being aware of it was connected to that. We're gonna find our way to the center. We're gonna bring our gifts into the world and be acknowledged for them. And that was true for me too, not consciously either, but it was very clear that, the idea that the Prime Minister and his wife, who were from the more center of the universe in Canada, particularly at least in Quebec, were noticing my work. It's interesting. It's like when I was in the creative life, I didn't really give a shit. It's like I was in like the calling is the greatest zone there is for me, right? It's the encoded path, but you'll find this in your life if you think you figured it all out and nobody can hook you and nothing can con you and all that stuff. But then there's these little weak spots inside of the consciousness, parts that are still regressed, that are still back there, that have not yet found their sort of maturation and solidity and integration. So this peripheral piece, this outside looking in piece, it was no longer relevant with respect to stars. I wasn't chasing Oprah. I liked it when famous people liked my work and brought it to the world. And sometimes it had a little egoic feeling to it. Maria Shriver follows me. I'm friendly with Leanne Rimes, who I happen to think is, I think, my favorite of them all. But the political, this hooked me. This was like an unexpected. I mean, who would have ever expected this? They're always sort of a million miles away from our lives, for the most part. And that we could call that a weak spot in my consciousness. Not beating myself up, but it's so if you reach a place where you're sure nobody can fool you, nothing can fool you, look closer at the parts of you that are still living in that old childhood patterning, where, for example, your family's greatest claim to fame with respect to famous people was my father shaking the hands of Gregory Peck on the stairs of Old City Hall in Toronto, like in the 40s or 50s or something, the 50s. And that carries forward. And you could be the most brilliant inventor of things out there, Einstein, for fuck's sakes, and you're still carrying this stuff. Maybe that's where Einstein would get lost in his stuff and his messy stuff, and just because he knew the world would hook him, he still had stuff that would hook him. So I got hooked. That little, ironically, I call it the Jewish Judd Hirsch part of me on my shoulder when he was saying, "Don't do this. Whatever you do, don't do this." My stuff, I had 51% to 49. That's what I used to say, and made the move. And so far, at least to this point now, particularly after being on the Devil's Playground for 5 years, I'm living to regret it. We'll see what happens. Maybe I sometimes think there's something much more profound happening here than even I realize, and that's why I survived it. But in any event, if you could, please pre-order a copy of this baby. There's so much stuff happening to get in the way of this thing that all I can hope for is some grassroots movement. I think young people who understand the internet, because there's so much about it, is how we're getting hooked online, how our consciousness is being divided, how we're being played, basically, by these systems and these people. But I think there's something in this book that's identifiable for everybody. And it's available on Amazon. You can bring it into libraries if you mention it to a library. They just need the ISBN, which is on Amazon. It's published by a small press in Oregon called Trine Day. And it's distributed by IPG, which is one of the best. It's the best independent distributor in the world. That's part of why I wanted to do this deal with them. And I will try to show up shortly and read the next part of it without a commentary. Anyway, thanks for being there.